On December the 31st, 1993, a crime committed in Ermioni shocked Greece. The 7-year-old son of Manolis and Georgia Douris was found dead and sexually abused. On New Year's Eve, little Nikos was late coming home, causing his parents and 6 siblings to worry. Manolis and Georgia Douris immediately contacted the police, where they reported their son's disappearance. Although the required hours after which investigations can officially begin had not passed, the authorities mobilized immediately, and so did the local community of Ermioni. Police, but also neighbors, relatives and friends of the family combed the area to find the 7-year-old boy. Finally, Manolis Douris, together with his other son, found the child dead and abused. The boy's body was hidden in the wall of a chicken coop near the family's house. The medical examiner, Philippos Koutsaftis, stated in his conclusion that the child died of suffocation as the perpetrator had closed his nose and mouth after first raping him. Scenes of tragedy followed. The father mourned the loss of his child and vowed to avenge the murder. In the eyes of society, which watched the developments in shock, Douris was a heartbroken father, his heart torn apart with grief and loss. However, upon asking natives, reporters discovered a very different description of the father and family. Manolis was married to Georgia, and they did live in Ermioni with their 7 children. Both parents worked hard to make ends meet, he as a builder and then as a painter, doing other jobs at the same time, while his wife worked wherever she could find a wage. The large family, however, faced many deprivations and difficulties, which were not only of a financial nature. The father was abusing the children, swearing at them, beating them, and treating them in an even worse way. The children roamed the streets, starving, barefoot, and sometimes in poor physical condition. The children were described as bad children who would steal frequently. Manolis Douris was a man with a severe psychological problem. In 1974, he fought in Cyprus resisting the Turkish invasion. The experience was very harsh, as he saw many brutal massacres. Douris went berserk and was hospitalized, where the doctors decided that he was suffering from the Cyprus syndrome. The problems he had before his participation in the hostilities worsened. He later claimed that he suffered from an illness that caused him to have seizures and cloud his mind. After the murder of Nikolakis, it was revealed that Douris was selling his children to residents of Ermioni for sex, while 2 years before the terrible event there had been an uproar with a very serious complaint. According to him, a 76-year-old countryman had sexually abused one of his children. The 76-year-old sister later spoke about blackmail with which Douris sought to make money. Douris went to the police and filed a lawsuit against my brother for raping one of his boys, as a result of which he was arrested and put in prison, she said. Then Douris asked my brother for 2 million drachmas, and my brother gave it to him. Then Douris went and withdrew the lawsuit. Douris had done the same to someone else and took 1 million drachmas from him. The complaint about my brother was unfair. It wasn't true. Unfortunately for us, my brother, after what happened, was released from prison, but he died from his grief. He couldn't stand it. On the fateful Thursday, December 30th, 1993, the 7-year-old Nikolakis had gone to the field and was playing with other children. Around 6 in the evening, he returned home together with a cousin of the same age, who was also the last person to see Nikolakis before the tragic event. Douris met his child in the yard, asked him where he was and why he was late to return, slapped him a few times, and forcibly led him into a storeroom in the courtyard of the house. The child was disobedient, and he hit him again. He placed him on a bench, stripped him of his clothes, and after gagging him so he wouldn't scream, raped him. The medical examiner's examination showed gruesome evidence that the child had not simply been raped, but that his anus had been mutilated with some object, in addition to the sexual acts. He then covered his mouth and nose with his hands to prevent him from breathing, causing the child to die of suffocation. Then he pierced its body with a pointed object to check if it would react. He went out a little to see if anyone had seen him, and when he was satisfied that there was no witnesses, he returned to the warehouse, dressed the child, lifted him in his arms, and carried him to a place where he was later found. With perfect composure, he went to his house and, full of wonder, asked his wife and children what had happened to Nikos, where he was, and why he was late. As the time passed and Nikos did not appear, the family became worried and they all went out and started looking everywhere, but to no avail. So douris went to the Kranivi police station and reported the disappearance of his child. As the police later revealed, when he made the complaint, he seemed certain that his child was not alive. To the duty officer, who tried to give him courage, telling him not to worry, he said, "They killed my child, and we are not going to find him. He is not alive," and pretended to be inconsolable. Relatives, villagers, friends and the police began combing all over Ermioni, but the child was nowhere to be found. At some point, douris left with one of his boys, and they went to the place where he had hidden Nikolaikis. Crying and cursing the child's killer, he left the scene with the child in his arms and took him by taxi to the health center. There it was determined that the child was deceased, and his body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy. The coroner was horrified to witness severe sexual abuse and lacerations, and hacks to various parts of his body, and further scattered post-mortem burns. He also took samples of blood and anal material that were delivered to the laboratories of the Forensic Society, while the laboratories were also sent 12 hairs found on the child's face around his lips, 9 hairs found in his anus, and 22 hairs found on his jacket. From the laboratory examination, it emerged that one of the hairs found in the child's anus belonged to Manolis douris. Seminal fluid was not detected in any of the findings. About 60 hours after the murder of his child, douris was cursing his killer and threatening to take revenge on him and not leave him alive. Even when he was called in for questioning because he was considered a suspect, he denied all the charges. The investigative process lasted 2 days, and he had to testify 3 times until he confessed in detail what he did. The first time, he denied everything. In his first pre-trial statement, douris stated this: "On the 30th of December 1993, together with my 3 children, Adonis, Dimitris and Elias, around 2:45, we returned from Kranivi, where we were working, to our house in Ermioni. I sat down for a while to rest, and then went into my home storage room to arrange some tools that I use at work. When I got home, my little boy Nikos was absent, and my wife said he was at the football game. Around 6 p.m, Nikos entered the yard, and I furiously started shouting at him, 'Where have you been?' The child was scared because I was very angry. Again, he was late to return to home, and I kept telling him not to be late. Out of anger, I raised my hands and hit him on the head, causing the child to fall down in the yard. I immediately grabbed him in my hands and went down to the beach of a village. I believed that the child had died, and I had to find a place to hide him. At a distance of about 300 yards from my house, when I came to an uninhabited half-timbered house surrounded by a wall, and there was also an old basket, I jumped over the wall, went to the middle terrace inside the wall, and placed my dead child there. I then left there, went home, and asked them if Nikos had come, and my mother-in-law said he hadn't. The route I took from my house was dark, and no other person saw me. When I hit the child, my mother-in-law, Lilu Panayota, was at home. My children and my wife were looking for Nikolaikis. After some time after searching for the child, we went to the Kranivi police station and reported his disappearance. Then we went back to Ermioni. There were police too, and we were all looking for the kid. I had told no one that I had previously killed the child and hidden it in the place I mentioned. Around 2:30 on the 31st of December 1993, I took my son Adonis and went to the place where I had placed Nikos. I jumped in, pulled him out, and then running, took him to my best man Nikolopoulos' house on the beach, and from there we took the child to the Granivi hospital and then to Athens for an autopsy. I did not sexually abuse my child. My act, for which I repent, I did not even understand how I did it. It was the wrong time, but he found me. I was in a furious state. I had a lot of nerves, because I suffer from nervous disorders that I acquired when I was in the army. I also made a suicide attempt previously, about a month ago. I had taken medicine sprinkled on flowers, and I had been hospitalized in the hospital of Nafplion. I apologized to my family, I acted out of my mind, and when I realized what I had done, it was too late for me. I have nothing else to add. Second pre-trial apology. In the second statement, douris gives more details but again denied the crime of rape and claimed that someone else may have committed it. And to support his claim, he mentions how, when the little boy came home, he was frightened and afraid. This statement states the following. On Thursday, December the 30th, and in the afternoon, it rained. At about 6 o'clock, when I, in a state of irritation and without controlling myself from my anger, I hit my son, Nikos, aged 7, on the head with my hands. The rain continued. When I hit Nikos, who fell down unconscious immediately, my mother-in-law was at home, who didn't realize anything. When the child fell down, he probably hit his head somewhere and died. Because I shook him, and he didn't move. I panicked. Immediately, I took him in my hands and covered him with his jacket. I went out towards the road that leads to the centre and the beach of a village. The road was dark, it was raining, and I didn't meet a single person. I tried to find a suitable place to leave my child, and then after I calmed down, I put his body there quickly. At a distance of 300 meters from my house, there are old buildings, and they have a courtyard with a wall around it. After leaning the child against the wall, I jumped in, holding him at the same time with one hand, and carefully placed him on the upper terrace that is there, after covering him with the jacket. Then I went out and went home and started looking for the child. All my above movements were noticed by no one. The jacket, in the position it was found, I believe, must have fallen from the rain. I didn't take his boots off, but I think they must have fallen on the lower terrace by themselves, because they were a big size. That's why they were there. From the time I left my child's corpse there, I never went down into that area again, but as many times as I passed, which were twice, I looked in a way and saw that it was where I had left him. I didn't undress the child, and I didn't know anything about rape and burns. I believe that this must have been done by another person, somewhere else, before the child, Nikos, came home, because when he came home, he seemed frightened and scared, but I could not control my nerves, and I hit him, with the known result. The blow was done unintentionally, and without believing that he could die. He answered the investigator's questions calmly, adding at the end, "As I remember, I entered with my child Nikos in the warehouse of my house, which is my laboratory, and pierced it with a fine pin to see if he would react. It is possible that he touched some flammable material in the warehouse, and that the child suffered burns. The flammable material I have is acetone, which dissolves the paints. I don't have anything else." Third pre-investigation statement. In his supplementary testimony, the third in a row at the Granivi Security Department, douris mentions many chilling details about the murder and rape of his child. It was the first time that he admitted the rape and declared that he was sorry for what he did. On December the 30th, 1993, a Thursday, and at about 4:15, I returned home from work. My children, Adonis, Dimitris, and Elias, were with me at work. I did not find my son Nikos, aged 7, at home, because he had left to go and play. After a while I went to the warehouse that is next to my house, and in the yard, to prepare and clean some tools that I use in my work. I was very nervous, because I suffer from nervous disorders, and when around 6 o'clock my son Nikos came to the house, where we were looking for him, I asked him why he was late, and at the same time I hit him hard in the face, causing him to fall to the floor and hit his head. I was horrified and immediately took him in my hands and put him in the warehouse, spreading him on a counter. Since he gave me the impression that he was dead, I took a small pin and poked him in various parts of his body to see if he would react. Then, in a fit of rage, I pulled down his track pants and briefs and raped my child normally with my genitals. Do you remember telling us exactly how you hit your child and how he died? I don't remember because I was beside myself, Douris replied. From the medical examiner's death certificate, it appears that the child's death resulted from suffocation due to obstruction of the external respiratory openings and extensive injuries to the anus. What do you have to say about that? Maybe I put my hand on his mouth and nose during the rape unconsciously, Douris answered. When did you pierce with the pin to know if the child was alive? Before the rape or after it? I can't remember if it was before or after the rape. What did you do next after the child died? When I realized that my child had died, I left and holding him in my arms, I came out of a warehouse and I got dizzy. I slowly came to my senses. I went out the front door and headed towards the center of the village, to the old post office. I didn't meet anyone on the road. When I arrived at an uninhabited building with a walled-in porch, inside which there used to be a basketball net, I thought of hiding the child there. The place was familiar to me. I swatted my child on the wall and slowly went down to the upper terrace, which is inside the wall, and then I placed my child's body there, which I covered with his jacket. I sat there for a while, cried, and then left, exiting the same spot. There, I put my child's corpse, so that it would not be seen. I then went to my house and asked if Nikos is back. They said no, and I told them to keep looking. I took the car and went out to look for the child, pretending that I am looking for him. The purpose was to mislead the other family members. Around 10:30, my wife and I went to the Kranivi police station and reported the child missing. Then we went back to Hermione and searched, where the police also came for this purpose. Around 2:30 on a Friday, the whole family gathered at home, stopping the search. After I realized what I had done, and could not wait any longer, I decided to display the body of my child, which I had hidden. I took with me my eldest child, Adonis, age 18, and went straight to the place where I had hidden the body. I got down in the same way I had placed it, took him in my hands, picked him up, and assisted by my son, took him out into the street. Then shouting, my child, I took him to his godmother's house, which is on the beach, and from there to the Kranivi health station. I am very sorry for what I did. Everything that happened was done by myself. No one else from my family knows anything, nor did I tell them anything. Apart from rape, an act you did in the child's anus, did you do another act on your child's body, in another place? I did not attempt, nor did I do any other wrongful acts on the child's body, Douris replied. On your child's body, on the left hemithorax and left leg, the medical examiner observed burns, which according to his oral statement, were caused after his death. What do you have to say about that? Because of my profession, I am an oil painter. I have liquids in my storeroom, such as potash, acetal, and corrosive liquid, and as I put the child on the counter, they might have been spilled on him, and his body came into contact, and burns were created. Manolis Douris, under draconian security measures, was taken to the Nafplion Criminal Prosecutor's Office and prosecuted for premeditated homicide committed in a despicable manner, for rape and for indiscretion between relatives, while he was classified as a dangerous person. No lawyer could be found to defend him, and the prosecution appointed a lawyer from the Nafplio ex officio as defense counsel. Afterwards, Douris was referred to the Nafplion investigator for an apology. Outside the courts, Hermione residents and bystanders were gathered, who shouted curses at the perpetrator, and some of them attempted to lynch him. The defendant apologized on January 3rd, 1994, to the investigator and denied all charges. He claimed he was ill, had no awareness of what he was testifying about, and was under the influence of pills and was completely confused. He hinted that someone else had killed and raped his unfortunate child, and even mentioned that after Nicolaki's death, he had received a phone call from an unknown person who threatened him, telling him but if he spoke, he would burn down his house. At the end of his apology, he told him that he did not remember whether he had done the things of which he was accused, and that, if he had done them, he had to pay. With the unanimous opinion of the prosecutor and the investigator, the accused was taken to the prisons of Nafplio. A few days later, he was ordered to be transferred to the prisons of Corfu. During his transfer from Nafplio to Yanina, and from there to Corfu, douris was severely beaten. At some point during the journey, his fellow prisoners in the transfer agency cage began to beat him furiously, brutally abusing him with punches and kicks, mainly to his genitals and face. When the police officers accompanying him heard the commotion, douris was unconscious and in a bad condition. In Corfu, upon arriving at the port, dozens of wild-tempered residents were waiting for him, disapproving of him, while when he was taken to the hospital, many patients threatened to beat him and he was treated under police guard. Another problem arose in the prisons. The prisoners did not want him among them, and in fact, there was information among the prison guards that they were going to lynch him and kill him. So it was decided to keep him in a place outside the prison until the prisoners calmed down. It should be noted that he had received the same reactions and threats in the prisons of Nafplio, Corivalos, and Yanina, from where he had passed until he ended up in the maximum security prison in Corfu. The trial of Manolis Douris took place in November 1994 at the Mixed Jury Court of Corinth. Emergency security measures had to be taken because the same scenes were repeated over and over with the reactions of the people. People inside and outside the court were trying to lynch him. After a 4-day hearing, the court on November 23, 1994 issued its unanimous decision ordering Douris to life in prison for manslaughter with possible intent in a calm state of mind, 20 years in prison for raping his child, and 1 year in prison for incest. Many Corinthians who were inside the court began to shout, "Bravo, bravo." But child killer listened to the sentence imposed on him with composure. All he said was, "I'm innocent." He had previously stated that he was actually innocent, while naming his wife and her lover as the perpetrators. It is interesting that his wife, Georgia, throughout the trial, maintained that her husband was innocent. She argued the same after the conviction. Douris was taken to prison to serve his sentence, while his wife said that she would go all the way to Areospagos to prove Manolis' innocence. And while Douris was a prisoner in the prisons of Tripoli, the news of his suicide exploded like a bomb. On February 25, 1996, at 6 in the afternoon, Douris was found hanging with a television cable in the toilets. The prison guards found him in a comatose state and he was taken to the Tripoli hospital. Doctors tried to save him, but failed. His funeral was held the next day in Erimioni, and he was buried next to 7-year-old Nikolakis. For several months, no one had visited him in prison, and even his wife had stopped supporting him. Douris was constantly raped, beaten, and tortured on a daily basis by inmates. Just before he was found hanging, he again had shouted that he was innocent. The questions were many. Did he kill himself out of remorse? Couldn't he stand the lynching of his fellow prisoners? Did someone else hang him to make it look suicidal? Did he not endure punishment for a crime he did not commit? Whatever the truth, the fact is that Manolis Douris remains to this day in the world's consciousness a child killer, as was the verdict of the court.